What is happening with climate change, and it is becoming increasingly visible, is that its natural effects make the human habitat less secure in various places. The connection between climate change and conflict and instability is visible before our eyes. It's visible in high-profile conflicts, areas which are very well covered by the international news media, in the Middle East, West Africa, and Nigeria and Mali. It's also visible at with more local level conflicts in areas, the Horn of Africa and parts of South and Southeast Asia. These are not risks just about the future. These are risks of the present. They are clear, proven, and current. Remember that the target that was set by the Paris Agreement was to try to limit the effects of climate change to an average warming of 1.5 degrees. We are so close already to that limit. Looking ahead, projections suggest that by the middle of this century, if nothing is done, in most of Africa and Asia, there's going to be severe water insecurity, even in areas that now have plentiful supplies of water.
I think it's important to understand how climate change involves multiple forms of security risks. So it's not easy to just give a few examples. You need rather to talk about broad categories to understand the different forms of security risks. And they relate to livelihood conditions, how food, water, shelter, health issues are affected. It's related to critical infrastructure on food and energy systems, for instance, and also on migration due to degradation on, for instance, coastal areas. It is important in this work to recognize how climate change both involves these more sudden events, as could be exemplified by extreme weather events, but also the gradual changes on food production, on freshwater supply chain, and then also to take into account that some of these effects are transnational, and maybe those are the most difficult sometimes to really understand. Bridging silos, I think, is key, at the same time as we of course need the in-depth knowledge. So this is really what is needed to transform how organizations are working with these risks. We're working with 3 different working streams. One relates to being better in this knowledge, in the understanding about under what circumstances security risk from climate change occurs. So we have a better understanding and analysis about the security risk in itself. Another form is to analyze and policymaking and practitioners' work to respond to these risks. And the third area is to support the policymaking and the development of responses, so it can be developed to become better to deal with and to manage climate security risks.
We need to look at and understand much better the sort of holistic and the interaction in systems that we are observing. And this means, of course, that different actors need to come together. Actors that often are not used to talk to each other. You know, the peace-building community, the conflict discourse, and those who are dealing with natural resources and the environment and climate. They're still very much in silos and are not speaking to each other. And I think one of the really excellent parts of this conference is that those actors have been brought together and have had a very constructive conversation here.
And then the question is, well, do you have the governance institutions to be able to manage the change that climate change is pushing? And if you don't, then very often that change will become chaotic, disorganized, highly conflictual, and maybe even violent. So it's really the interaction between climate change and its natural effects on the one hand, and the social and political landscape on the other, which define whether or not the effects will be negative for peace. And what we're seeing over the past few years is increasing evidence of this negative knock-on effect of climate change.